Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Friday, August 27th, 2021. I feel like it's not been the best reading week for me. I don't know if I'm being too nitpicky about the stuff I've read, but I guess I'll go into it rather than just be vague. Future Rachel here because Zootalo, I forgot to film one of the most pinnacle parts of this video, which is when I read and discuss the next short story in this collection from Dorothy Parker. So anyway, I just read that short story, which is called Arrangement in Black and White, published in 1927, and it is the first story where Parker discusses race. I kind of feel like, it's one of those dashed off stories, and she writes a lot of women who are completely clueless in conversation about what they sound like and what they're doing. And sometimes maybe she's a little harsh about it, but in this one I feel like she's really spot on to the racism of the day. Because it takes place, as a lot of these stories do, at a party. And this party is being held in honor of a black man who is well known for singing spirituals. And so this woman comes up to the host to say, could you introduce me to this man? But of course she can't stop talking about how he's a colored man, and she keeps on saying, I have no feeling about it at all, of course, even though she can't stop talking about it and can't stop talking about her husband from the South who, is such a good person to the black people, and she just keeps on blathering and is being either patronizing or downright racist about black people. And then she makes a big show of extending her hand to, this black man, as though, she's being so magnanimous by treating him like he's a human being. And at the end of the story, she even says, oh, wait till I tell my husband I called him Mr. Or at one point she sees another, person at the party, a singer who is also somebody either of mixed race or something, or someone who looks dark, and she almost calls this person the N-word in front of this black man, and then congratulates herself with the host about not doing that. So, she's obviously quite full of herself for really, at the end of the day, not even treating this man as though he's a full human being. And like in all the other stories, the woman is constantly talking over the other people and just is completely unaware of the social cues that they're giving her. And it seems like a really apt portrayal of how racism might have gone in that day in the sort of circle where people think that they're being magnanimous, and of course they're not. So I did enjoy it. I thought it was clever, well done, and certainly a nice uptick to this video. So now back to past me. The first thing I finished this week was Motherland by Leah Franqui, which I was a good girl and returned to the library. I have my book club where we'll be discussing this book on Tuesday. Anyway, this is the story of a 30-something Jewish woman from New York who marries an Indian man, and they move to Mumbai. And this woman, Rachel, is not at all accustomed to her new life when her mother-in-law, Swati, decides that she is leaving her husband and is going to live with the couple forever. So that's even more of a culture shock. And these are two strong-willed women of two very different backgrounds, kind of clashing and ultimately finding a common ground. And I think I discussed this last week when I started the book, that I'm not sure Franqui did the best job with Swati. I don't think I always believed her as a character, and sort of the climax of her story was like the least believable thing. She did something with somebody, and spoilers, that I just feel like was a step too far, and it didn't seem to jive with how someone like her would really behave. I guess it's really one of those questions about when you're writing outside of your own culture about whether or not the reader will believe in the character you write. And I gotta say, just personally, I couldn't really get past that I didn't believe it, even though Franqui herself is an American Jewish woman married to an Indian man and living in India, although technically speaking, she went above and beyond to say that her own family and in-law life is far different from the drama in this book. I do think that Rachel as a character was pretty compelling, and she learned some things at the end, and it certainly wasn't solely a case of like Western lifestyle being better than Eastern lifestyle, although I do feel like we kind of leaned in that direction a little bit. But that probably is me being a little nitpicky. I also feel like Mumbai as a city, I think I said this last week too, but it really felt like a real city, and it almost felt like, to me, the more interesting parts were happening away from Swati and about Rachel coming to terms with her cultural biases and her personal setbacks with her interaction with Mumbai, the city. Really felt like a real lived-in place, you know, a teeming place with, you know, lots of different people. There was not a whole lot of Judaism in this book, although my Jewish book club did pick it for that reason, but generally speaking, Rachel's Judaism was a lot more low-key, though certainly not completely absent either, and we get a little bit of intel into her heritage, and, you know, she gives a little bit of nod to cultural things once in a while. And I thought it was interesting too. I mean, really, Franqui didn't touch on this a lot, so I probably am reading too much into it about how Judaism as a culture can kind of be accepted as another sort of eccentric culture, maybe, because, you know, there's so many different cultures in India and in Mumbai. But I don't think, I do think I might be going far with that, especially in this book where, frankly, I wish Franqui had not hit us over the head as much as she did with the messages she wanted us to take away about these two women. Although I think at the end of the day I enjoyed it. It gave me a lot to, you know, grapple with in my review, and hopefully also next week or in a couple days when I talk about it again with the book club. Next, I've read Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri. She first wrote it in Italian and then translated it herself, her first novel in almost a decade. I figure I won't talk too much about this one here either, because I made a whole video predominantly about this book and also Lahiri's recent memoir for Women in Translation Month, so I'll link that video down below. Also, I feel like there's just not a lot to say about this book. You know, it's very short. And it's about an unnamed character living her life through vignettes that are largely unconnected, just sort of observing life as it passes her by. You know, there's a few things that come into play. There's, you know, hints of drama with her parents, you know, as we all have drama. There's a couple of friends who make a couple of repeat appearances, although most of the people she interacts with, this unnamed narrator, you know, are either people she doesn't know and just sees on the street, or just relationships that she talks about once and never again. She's quite obviously a woman who feels detached a bit from life. I feel like actually the vignette I liked the most was when she was populating her sparse apartment with the cast-offs of a neighbor who was trying to get rid of his belongings in a Fleabag fashion. And so, like, for a little bit it was like she was trying to actually make a three-dimensional life for herself, you know, that was beyond her just being this like removed academic or whatever, but it didn't really go anywhere. You know, this sparse style, this plotless thing, it doesn't really work for me, and I'm depressed that, you know, I didn't like this book very much, because Jhumpa Lahiri is one of my favorite authors, but this really is quite the turn from what she used to write, and I have to say I prefer her former stuff, and I think a lot of people would, although I still, you know, am drawn to her as a writer and as a thinker, even though it seems like her style at the moment is a little more esoteric. But, you know, she changed a lot, I mean, from the last book to this book, so, you know, maybe, you know, she'll continue to grow and change too, and even writing in Italian, which obviously is not her first language, but she has been studying for 2 decades, and she could hopefully write something in Italian that has a little more of a story and a little more of characters next time. I will hope for that and see what comes next for her. This next book also feels like a little bit of a disappointment from a repeat author for me. This is Into the Heartless Wood by Joanna Ruth Meyer. It is her 4th published epic fantasy novel for young adults. And I'll add a disclaimer that I first met Joanna through a NaNoWriMo Vidler group long before she was even published or had an agent or anything, but I was very impressed by her drive, and I followed her career, and I've read all of her books, and I've enjoyed all of them, but this one definitely is my least favorite of the four so far. This is a fairy tale-esque story taking place in a secondary world kingdom where a young boy, 17-year-old boy named Owen, lives on the edge of a wood where his father maps the stars for the king for unknown purposes. And the wood itself is a dangerous, scary place where this wood witch, kills people and steals their souls. And she created daughters out of birch trees in order to be tree sirens, a clever take on the sirens of the sea to lure people to their deaths. And then they feed people's souls to the heartless tree, and they feed the forest that is growing and encroaching on the humans. And so this witch and also the king are in a bit of conflict with everybody else stuck in the middle. But of course, Owen has dealings with one of the tree sirens, one of the daughters, who he ultimately names Saren, and is a siren who wants to stop being a monster and turn into a real girl, but plot gets in the way of their budding romance, and they ultimately have to basically team up to stop a war between these two supernatural creatures. And the things that didn't work for me really is that none of the characters felt very fleshed out, and the world really only felt as big as the plot demanded of it. And it just brought me back to when I read her first book, Beneath the Haunting Sea. I was so drawn to her world building, and it was so obvious that there was more to be drawn out of this world. And in fact, then she did write a companion novel to that one, Beyond the Shadowed Earth. And I was just very impressed by it. But I get that fairy tales are kind of less invested in world building because it's more about the aesthetics of it and about being drawn into the magic, kind of for magic's sake. And this one kind of falls in the middle, I felt like. She wrote another book, Echo North, which was much more of a stereotypical fairy tale retelling, and it was a smaller story, so that the fact that there was less world building didn't bother me as much. But this one felt like it should have been a more complex world, because there were so many characters, and there, were neighboring kingdoms and all these references to things, and it just didn't feel bigger than the plot, even though the plot spanned a lot of time and space and characters. So that's mostly what disappointed me, and especially I thought Saren as a character just didn't have real motivations, and there was some gotcha shocker plot moments, and it just didn't work for me. I got all of the magical aesthetic stuff. We all went to watch this mythology playing out through the stars and supernatural creatures unfurling their supernatural elements, but it just wasn't enough for me. But again, I'll be sticking with this author. She has yet another book, a sequel to Echo North, I believe, coming out next year. And I still feel like I should stick with her and see what comes next. But meanwhile, what comes next for me, as in next on the docket of my reading, is this book. This is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, which is a retelling of its own, in a way, of the death of Shakespeare's son, Hamnet. And I think it primarily focuses on Hamnet's mother and what it's like for her to lose her son to the plague in 16th century England. And that's pretty much all I know about this, other than that it won the Women's Prize, and right now it is in contention for the BookTube Prize and the BookTube Prize Finals. So I can no longer say any more about this book because I'm officially judging it for that round. The BookTube Prize was started a couple of years ago by Robert at Barter Hordes, wherein a bunch of judges across BookTube and other platforms judge fiction and nonfiction, and starting next year, translated fiction. For several months of rounds, whittling down long lists of 48 to winners that will be announced in October. We're judging, books published in the U.S. In the last calendar year. And I will link to more information down below if you want to learn more about the prize. So that about covers it for me now. Hoping for better things in my reading yet to come. Although, again, I don't feel like I, absolutely hated anything I've read this week. But it disappointed me, and I felt criticisms about it. And, a couple of the authors were people I've seen better from in the past. So there's that. But what can you do? That's how it goes sometimes. I will be back on this channel in the next few days to do a book haul, so all new possibilities for hopefully great reading yet to come. So stay tuned. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.